Hey everybody, we're going to start talking about how do I develop healthier boundaries. I hope, as we've gone through the lesson so far, that you're kind of getting a sense of how important boundaries are, how they affect our ability to manage ourselves, which we're going to talk about that again in our next lesson. But also just how to manage our relationships better, where we're not hard and cruel or distant from people, but we're just more mindful of owning the responsibilities that we have, owning the authority and the power that God gives us to go with those responsibilities, and just managing that whole thing better. So how do you develop healthier boundaries? And here's how I want to put it in context. How do I develop healthier boundaries while I'm in the middle of some existing relationships that maybe don't have healthy boundaries as a part of their core makeup? What do I do now? How do I, kind of like Nicodemus, I can't go back and be born from my mother again. How do I start this thing over? And I'm not going to lie to you. It can be tricky. But here's the deal. Remember, the key word with boundaries is responsibility. And I would probably even strengthen that by saying owning your responsibility, because if you own your responsibility, the authority and power goes with it. If you relinquish your responsibility, it's just a whole lot harder. Sometimes somebody will say, well, if I do this, that, or the other, will this relationship get better? I wish I could give you that guarantee. I can't give you that guarantee, but I can tell you this. If you don't do anything different, nothing's going to change. Now, if you make some adjustments in a healthy direction, is there a chance that the other person or persons might make some adjustments and come with you? Yeah, it's possible. Guaranteed? No. But I can guarantee you, if you do nothing differently from what you're currently doing, it's not going to change. But here's the thing. If I would say this about in a counseling setting, no one's ever 100% responsible for the condition of the relationship. No one. No one's ever 100%. I've probably seen a few where they were 90%. But most of the time, it's 30, 70, 60, 40, whatever. But what if you just made a commitment? I'm going to own my part. I'm going to do what I can do. And that leads into the first point. How do I develop healthier boundaries? The first point I would want to throw at you is this. Start with your circle. Remember, we've used the whole hula hoop idea to talk about our circle of responsibility. Start with your circle. You do not have to wait on anyone else. Well, if my husband, if my wife, if my kids, if my parents, absolutely. Would that make life easier? Absolutely. But if you wait for them to change, you could be waiting for the rest of your life. And you don't have to. I like to say it like this. You can move toward health and they can come with you or not. But either way, you're going to get healthier. And I just see that as a win. Here's an interesting way to say something. Freedom comes from taking responsibility. Bondage from giving it away. Remember, we talked about going to God first and most for virtually everything you need. So I don't need my wife to love me. I want my wife to love me. Do you realize how freeing it is when I've taken responsibility for getting my need for love met? I've taken responsibility for going to God first and most. Now, no, my days don't go as well if Colleen and I are on the same page. I hate it when we've missed each other, and it's usually her fault, by the way. But I'm kidding. But I hate it when we're off page with each other. And but I've learned to take responsibility for my need for love. That doesn't mean I don't feel loved. It just means we've got to work through something. Here's an interesting quote for you. More people suffer from trying to change or control others than any other disease. I'm going to read that again. More people suffer from trying to change or control others than any other disease. Do you realize how much energy we expend trying to make other people do what we think we need them to do? Since you can't make anyone else change, You can't make anyone else change. Change yourself so their behavior no longer works on you. You've got somebody in your life, could be a parent, a child, friend, whatever, and they have a certain way that they guilt you or manipulate you into things. Work on yourself so that it just doesn't work anymore. You don't even have to tell them. You don't have to like rub it in their face. They'll know it though. They'll feel it. And it's a cool feeling when you know they don't have the same hook in you that they once did. So number one, how do I develop healthier boundaries? Start with your circle. Start with what's inside your circle and grow there. And you'd be surprised at what can happen from there. All right, number two, how do I develop healthier boundaries? Own, O-W-N, own your emotions. They're in your circle. Own your emotions. They're in your circle. You know, emotions are funny. I love to talk about emotions because they're tricky. Most people seem to have this idea. I'm walking down the street, whistling, having a great day, and depression jumps and mugs me. And the next day, I'm not feeling real great. I don't see it unfolding that way. And science and research and things that I've read and studied bear that out. I'm going to read you a couple of thoughts, and then we're going to kind of talk about them. But just to get you thinking, emotions don't happen to us. They are inner signals sending us energy and information, prompting us to act. What in the world does that mean? The word emote, that emotion comes from, means to move. God gave us every emotion we have. That includes anger, depression. God gave us all the emotions, and their designed intent is to move us. The good ones move us toward more. I want more of that, whatever it is. The bad ones move us away from things we don't want any more of. So every emotion you experience is self-generated from within you based on brain chemistry, past experiences, and your interpretation of the current moment. I'm going to read that again. Every emotion you or I experience is generated within myself. Every emotion I feel is chemical and electrical in nature. In my brain, there's chemicals and electrical signals that manifest joy, sadness, anger, whatever. Now, why am I saying it that way? Because boundaries are all about the R word, responsibility. So what am I saying? I want you to think about that when you're feeling a certain way, the best place to start is with yourself. And we're going to use the rest of this lesson and our next lesson to give you some tools for this. But I want you to think about this. Every emotion you have is self-generated. If you're willing to own your emotions and learn some skills, you can balance them out, manage them much better than you think you can. Here's another thought for you. Learn to listen to your emotions, but don't believe everything they tell you. Learn to listen to them. I would even go so far as this, and this is particularly a good thing for guys to do, because guys don't tend to pay as much attention to their emotions. It isn't very, it's pretty often you could ask a guy, hey, what are you feeling? And their answer is, nothing. Or, hey, tell me about what you're feeling. I don't know. Now, all of us can fall into that. But here's a cool little skill. Practice naming what you're feeling. And I really mean that. Practice naming what you're feeling. Naming something is kind of like the handle on a suitcase. It's a whole lot easier to carry that suitcase by the handle. And when you name an emotion, I don't know, it's weird, but when you name an emotion, you feel just a little bit less helpless and hopeless. As soon as you name it, you just feel like it's become a little bit more manageable. All right, the last thing I want to talk about this area of emotion is this. Emotions react to the present as if it were the past. Emotions react to the present as if it were the past. Would you agree that God knew Adam and Eve were going to fall, and that we would live our lives in a hostile environment. And again, I don't have time to theologically walk through all that, but I think we all pretty much agree that because of the fall and sin entering the world and death through sin, and that basically the environment in which we spend our life here on earth is a hostile environment. Well, if God knew we were going to spend our existence on earth in a hostile environment, I believe he created us, our system, including our brain, to know how to handle threatening situations. What am I getting at? You ever been out mowing the grass, which I hate to do, by the way. You ever been out mowing the grass, and out of your peripheral vision, you see a long, thin, dark, wiggly thing. And the next thing you know, you sort of wake up 10 feet away as you're landing. Now, you were here mowing the grass, this happened, and you kind of wake up over here. Who brought you or got you from here to there? Now again, don't get weird with it, you did. But were you standing here mowing, saw this out of your peripheral vision, and then thought, that is a snake, I should jump. I think I will jump away. Ain't how it works. What happened? Because God knew we were going to live in a hostile environment, he designed the brain, that there's a part of your brain that looks for, detects, and plans responses to potential danger. For instance, I'm talking to a young lady in my sanctuary years ago, worship center, and the main door's back here and stage is up. She's part of the worship team. We're just standing talking before service. Next thing I know, she turns white as a sheet and virtually runs me over to get out of the room. Well, I'm in the process at that time of in counseling with her, and I'm like, whoa, what in the world was that? What did I do? What did I say? And I talked to her later, and what happened is she was standing there facing me this way. The door to the worship center's back here. And in her peripheral vision, a man came through the door, same height, body style, facial hair, and everything, as one of the men that had abused her earlier in her life. So without any conscious thought, her brain registered this presence, identified, pulled it through the file of past experiences, and said, danger, danger, danger. And here's an interesting word for it. It hijacked her brain, and she took off out of the room. Now, obviously, it was not the guy, and when that effect kind of subsided, she knew it wasn't the guy. What exactly was that? That's your brain's capacity to think, feel, and respond very quickly to protect you. What in the world does this have to do with boundaries? Many of the responses you have to other people are happening at a level below conscious thought. Have you ever walked towards someone to meet them, reached out to shake their hand, and you were already reacting to them in some way? You hadn't even shaken their hand yet. You haven't even said hello. But somehow they're triggering, I'm going to use that word again, they're triggering something from your past. Your emotions react to the present as if it were the past. Why is this important? Because if you're going to learn to function with healthy boundaries and relationships that thrive, and where you give each other the room and the space to grow and become healthier, you're going to have to learn how to recognize that some of your responses to situations that you've become so accustomed to because you've done them for so long, they probably don't even make sense to you when you really stop and look at them. But you're going to have to slow down and learn how to kind of unplug their power source. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in our next session. Is you can't, grabbing an emotion is kind of like grabbing water. You can't grab water. So you can't control emotion as easily as you can some other things, but you can unplug its power source. So what we're going to talk about in our next lesson is a really, really important thing, and this is the way I'd say it to you, to whet your appetite. The ants are ruining your picnic. We're going to talk about the key to learning to manage your emotions. See you next time. All right, in this lesson, we talked about emotions and how to manage them better. Emotions are kind of, we tend to feel sort of hijacked by them. We tend to feel and believe that we don't have very much control over them. And as we discussed in the lesson, we really do. We have more than we realize. But part of it is we sort of just let them happen. And I found challenging people to think about what they're feeling and name what they're feeling. Just that one simple process helps you not feel as victimized by your feelings. So for instance, you have a fuss with your spouse, let's say, or somebody at work. What you could do when you're away from them, obviously if you could do this, if you practice enough, you can do it during the fight. But let's say afterwards, you're like, okay, what in the world was going on there? So what you want to do is get quiet and ask yourself, what was I feeling? And not when the thing got overheated, but what was I feeling earlier? And name it. Well, I was feeling overlooked. I was feeling abandoned. I was feeling whatever. So give a name to what you were feeling. And then all that does is it starts helping you to work through not feeling quite as blindsided by your emotions.